Have you ever stopped to think about the most intense moment in Jesus' life? It wasn't on the cross. It was before that. In Gethsemane, there alone, he faced a battle so overwhelming that he sweat drops of blood. But why? What really happened on that silent, mysterious night? And what did the cup he asked the Father to take away truly mean? In the next few minutes, you're going to uncover surprising details about this night that changed history. But first, let me ask you, have you ever heard about Jesus sweating blood in Gethsemane? Drop a comment below. Now, let's dive into this mystery. Gethsemane was not just a peaceful garden under the moonlight. It was there in the silence of the night that the most intense moment of Jesus' life took place. While many believe the crucifixion was the peak of his suffering, it was in Gethsemane that he faced the true battle. Bearing the crushing weight of humanity's sin, Jesus sweated drops of blood, an overwhelming reflection of the indescribable anguish that consumed him. Have you ever stopped to consider what this truly means? His pain began before the cross, and that reality changes everything. The meaning of Gethsemane goes beyond being just a physical place. Its name, which means olive press, reveals something profound. Just as olives were crushed to extract pure oil, Jesus was crushed by the weight of sin and sorrow. In that garden, he felt the loneliness, the abandonment, and the overwhelming pressure of the sacrifice he was about to make. And yet, he remained steadfast. Can you imagine having full knowledge of everything that was about to happen and still choosing to move forward? Jesus' spiritual battle in Gethsemane was not a physical struggle, but a war between flesh and spirit. There he did not merely pray. He fought against fear, agony, and the temptation to turn back. His suffering was so intense that his body reacted in an extreme way, sweating blood. This reveals the depth of the burden he bore. He knew that the only way to save us was to accept this path. And here arises a crucial question. What was the cup that he asked to be taken away? This cup was far more than just physical suffering. It represented God's wrath against the sin of humanity. Jesus did not only fear the pain of the cross, but the weight of becoming sin on our behalf. He knew that, for a moment, he would experience something he had never known before, separation from the Father. And yet he said, "Not my will, but yours be done." This absolute surrender teaches us something profound about trust and obedience. But what did this cup truly mean? And why did he have to drink it? The name Gethsemane carries a meaning far deeper than a mere geographical location. In Hebrew, it means olive press, a seemingly common name for the time, but one that holds powerful symbolism. Just as olives were pressed to produce pure oil, Jesus was pressed by sorrow, fear, and the weight of humanity's sin. He was being crushed emotionally and spiritually, preparing for the ultimate sacrifice. Have you ever noticed how God uses small details to reveal great truths? Gethsemane was not chosen by chance. The very process of extracting oil in Jewish culture was a reflection of what would happen to Jesus that night. Olives were placed under a massive stone and pressed until they released their oil, an essential element for daily life. In the same way, Jesus was placed under unbearable pressure, shedding his first drops of blood there, even before reaching the cross. This detail reminds us that his suffering did not begin at Calvary, but long before, on that silent night. The significance of Gethsemane in the Bible becomes even clearer when we understand that oil symbolized anointing and the presence of God. Oil was used to anoint kings and priests, and now, in that very garden, Jesus, the King of Kings and the eternal High Priest, was being crushed under the weight of his mission. He was not just praying, he was preparing to become the perfect sacrifice. The connection between this place and Christ's destiny is truly astonishing. Can you imagine standing before such a painful choice and still deciding to move forward? Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane reveals a crucial aspect of his mission. He knew what was coming, yet he did not run. He surrendered completely to the Father's plan. What happened in Gethsemane marked the beginning of the most important moment in history, a point of no return. But beyond the visible, something even deeper was taking place. An invisible war was being fought. And it is precisely this spiritual battle that we will explore next. Many see Gethsemane merely as a place of prayer, but what happened there was far more intense, a true spiritual battle. Jesus wasn't just speaking with the Father. He was carrying the weight of all humanity. It was the defining moment where the struggle between flesh and spirit reached its peak. He knew the cross was near, but before facing it, he had to overcome this moment in the garden. Have you ever stopped to consider the magnitude of this invisible battle? Jesus' spiritual battle in Gethsemane was not against Roman soldiers or the religious leaders who persecuted him. It was something much greater. The enemy sought to weaken him, to make him give up, to plant fear and doubt. Jesus' suffering in the garden was proof of what was at stake: the salvation of all humanity. The pressure was so intense that his body reacted in an extreme way. He sweat drops of blood. Can you imagine experiencing such overwhelming anguish that your body physically begins to bleed? Gethsemane in the Bible is the backdrop for one of the most profound moments of the Christian faith. Jesus, the Son of God, kneeling in agony, wrestling with the terror of what was to come. Yet even in this struggle, he did not flee. He chose to endure, showing that obedience to God is the greatest victory we can achieve. Many believe the battle was won at the cross, but in reality, it was in the garden that he made the decision to see it through. And now, what he would face next was even more profound: the mystery of the cup. This cup was not a physical object, but a representation of divine wrath against sin. What is the cup of Jesus? It was the judgment that should have fallen on us, but he chose to take it in our place. The weight of the world was upon him, and the decision he made that night changed everything. But why did Jesus ask for this cup to be taken away? This remains one of the greatest mysteries of his prayer. What is the cup of Jesus? Many think it was merely a symbol of suffering and pain, but its meaning is far deeper. In biblical culture, the cup represents one's destiny, the portion given by God. For Jesus, this cup was God's wrath against the sin of humanity. He knew that by drinking it, he would endure the judgment meant for us. Imagine carrying the entire guilt of the world in a single moment. That was what stood before him that night. Gethsemane and the crucifixion were directly connected. There, in the garden, he was already beginning to feel the weight of the cross. Jesus' suffering in the garden was not just physical, but also spiritual and emotional. He was about to experience separation from the Father for the first time in all eternity. That was the true pain, not just the wounds and humiliation, but the temporary rupture of perfect communion with God. Who has never felt the weight of loneliness? Now imagine that loneliness on a cosmic scale, carrying the sins of all humanity. Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane reveals both his humanity and divinity. He asked that, if possible, the cup be taken from him, but immediately declared, "Not my will, but yours be done." Matthew 26, verse 39. This moment teaches us something powerful. There is nothing wrong with feeling fear or anguish, but true faith is trusting in God even when everything seems impossible. How often do we ask God to remove something difficult from our lives, but are not willing to accept his will? Jesus' submission to God is the heart of this story. He did not retreat. He did not try to escape. He accepted the cup because he knew it was the only way to redeem the world. It was in this moment that victory began to take shape. But his suffering did not stop there. Something even more astonishing happened. He began to sweat drops of blood, a rare phenomenon, yet one that reveals the sheer intensity of what was. Jesus sweating drops of blood in Gethsemane is one of the most striking details of this story. Science calls this phenomenon hematidrosis, a rare condition that occurs under extreme stress and anguish. Tiny blood vessels near the sweat glands rupture, causing blood to mix with sweat. This reveals the level of suffering Jesus endured in the garden, even before any physical harm was inflicted upon him. Imagine a level of distress so deep that your own body reacts this way. Gethsemane in the Bible is the only place where this phenomenon is mentioned in relation to Jesus. Luke, who is a physician, describes it with precision. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling to the ground. Luke 22 verse 44. This detail is not there by accident. God wanted us to understand the depth of the pain Jesus faced. And all of this happened before a single blow, before the crown of thorns. His sacrifice began there, in those drops of blood. This extreme suffering was not just about the fear of the cross, but about Jesus' spiritual battle. He knew he was about to bear the sin of the world. The pressure was crushing. Who hasn't experienced a moment when it felt like the weight of the world was on their shoulders? Now, multiply that infinitely. Jesus felt it all, yet he did not turn away. He faced the pain head-on because he knew he was redeeming each one of us. The significance of Gethsemane becomes even clearer when we realize that Jesus was completely alone in that moment. His disciples were sleeping, unaware of the gravity of what was happening. While he was sweating blood, his closest friends were resting. This made the moment even more painful. Yet despite his loneliness, he pressed on. And at the height of his agony, he uttered the most powerful prayer in history. "Not my will, but yours be done." A complete surrender to the Father. But what does this prayer truly mean? Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane reveals one of the most human and, at the same time, most divine moments in the entire Bible. There, alone in agony, he cried out to the Father with words full of sorrow. "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Matthew 26 verse 39. This single phrase captures the internal struggle he was facing. Who hasn't wished to escape suffering? But what makes this prayer so powerful is the second part. He chose God's will over his own. This prayer demonstrates the very essence of Jesus' submission to God. He knew exactly what lay ahead: the pain, the betrayal, the separation from the Father. And yet, he did not try to escape his destiny. He did not flee, nor did he question God's justice. He simply trusted. How often do we face hardships and just want God to take them away? Jesus teaches us that true faith is not about avoiding suffering, but about trusting that God has a greater purpose. Jesus' spiritual battle in the garden was won at that moment. He could have chosen a different path. He could have said no, but he chose to drink the cup of God's wrath so that we wouldn't have to. This level of surrender challenges us. Do we trust God in the same way? When pain comes, when things spiral out of control, can we truly say, "Your will be done"? This is the hardest prayer to pray, but also the most transformative. Jesus' suffering in the garden did not end with this prayer. On the contrary, the decision he made there paved the way for everything that was about to unfold. And as he prepared to face his destiny, something unexpected happened. One of his disciples, someone close, someone he trusted, was about to betray him in the cruelest way possible. How could someone so intimate turn into a traitor? Judas' betrayal with a kiss is one of the most shocking moments in the story of Jesus. A gesture of affection turned into a symbol of deceit and pain. Judas, one of the 12, the one who walked alongside the Master, chose to hand him over for 30 pieces of silver. And he did it in a calculated way. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Matthew 26 verse 48. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Imagine that pain being felt by the very Son of God. Gethsemane in the Bible grows even darker at this moment. The peacefulness of the garden is shattered by the sound of soldiers approaching, torches lighting up the night, and Judas stepping toward Jesus. But the Master's response is astonishing. "Friend, why have you come?" Matthew 26 verse 50. Friend. Even in betrayal, Jesus called Judas friend. This teaches us something profound. He was not being overpowered. He was surrendering out of love. Gethsemane and the crucifixion were connected from the very beginning, and Judas' betrayal was a crucial piece of this plan. But think about it. Jesus knew who Judas was, knew what he would do, and yet still allowed him to be among the 12. Why? Because Christ's love goes beyond human logic. He does not exclude anyone. Even the traitor had the chance to repent. How many times have we also betrayed him through our choices? And yet, he still calls us friends. Jesus' suffering in the garden intensified with this betrayal. His disciples, confused and terrified, didn't know what to do. Peter tried to fight back, cutting off a soldier's ear. But Jesus immediately reversed the situation, restoring the soldier's ear. He did not come to fight that way. He came to surrender. And now prophecy was unfolding. He would be taken, arrested, and abandoned. But what happened to the disciples at that moment? Jesus' loneliness in Gethsemane was one of the most painful aspects of that night. While he faced the most intense battle of his life, his disciples slept. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Matthew 26 verse 40. 3 times he called them, and 3 times they failed to stay awake. If even his closest friends failed to support him in that moment, imagine the weight he carried. Have you ever gone through a difficult moment and realized no one was truly there for you? Jesus' suffering in the garden was not only physical or spiritual, but also deeply emotional. He knew that in just a few hours, these same disciples would flee. Peter, the one who swore he would never abandon him, would deny him 3 times before dawn. The silence of the garden, his friends sleeping, the approaching betrayal, all of it made Gethsemane even heavier. Who hasn't felt alone, even while surrounded by people? Jesus experienced that pain in its most profound form. The significance of Gethsemane is revealed in this contrast. On one side, the Son of God bearing the weight of the world. On the other, his disciples unable to grasp the gravity of the moment. But Jesus did not condemn them. He knew they were weak, just like us, who often fail to watch and pray. How many times has God called us to be with him, and we simply fall asleep, missing crucial moments? Gethsemane and the crucifixion were about to collide. Jesus would not only face loneliness, but also violence, humiliation, and extreme pain. The guards were closing in. Judas had already given the signal, and the Master's final night of freedom was coming to an end. But before the cross, there was something even more powerful. The decision he made that night would change the destiny of humanity forever. Gethsemane and the crucifixion are deeply connected. What happened in the garden was the first act of a sacrifice that would be completed on the cross. There, Jesus was already giving his life, not with nails, but through absolute submission to the Father. Rise, let us go. See, my betrayer is approaching. Matthew 26 verse 46. He did not run, he did not resist. He simply stood up and walked toward his destiny. Have you ever wondered what it means to accept a purpose, even when it involves pain? The significance of Gethsemane is reflected in the way Jesus faced his final moments of freedom. He was not caught off guard, he did not fight the soldiers, and he did not beg for his life. He had already won the battle in the garden. The cross was merely the consequence of a decision that had already been made. The real question is, would we have that kind of courage? Many say they would give everything for God, but could they bear the weight of such a mission? Jesus' submission to God reached its peak that night. What happened in Gethsemane was preparation for the greatest act of love in history. He was about to be beaten, humiliated, and crucified, but his mind was already made up. He had taken up the cross in his heart long before carrying it on his shoulders. This teaches us that great battles are not won on the battlefield, but in the moment of decision. And that decision brings us to a crucial point, the call to total surrender. What Jesus did in Gethsemane was not just for a group of people in that time. It was for each of us today. and his surrender demands a response. If he went to the very end for us, are we willing to follow him in the same way? Gethsemane challenges us to reflect on our own faith. Jesus did not merely pray there. He surrendered completely to the Father's will. If anyone wants to follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Matthew 16 verse 24. What does it mean to take up the cross? It's not just about facing difficulties, but about choosing to live for God, even when it costs us something. Are we truly willing to walk this path? The significance of Gethsemane goes beyond a historical event. It teaches us that true obedience does not happen when everything is easy, but when pain makes us want to give up. Jesus did not turn back, and that is the greatest lesson. How often do we pray for God to remove challenges, when in reality, he wants us to trust him and face them? Gethsemane teaches us that true faith is about surrender, not escape. Jesus' suffering in the garden shows that even the Son of God felt anguish, but he did not let it stop him from fulfilling his purpose. And what about us? Do we trust God even when we don't understand what he is doing? Jesus' response was clear: "Your will be done." This is the greatest declaration of faith anyone can make. It's easy to trust when everything is going well, but what about when the time comes to carry our own cross? And now, the final question: how does this story transform your life? Gethsemane and the crucifixion are part of a single journey, a journey that demands a response. Jesus surrendered himself for us. Now it is up to each one of us to decide: will we simply admire this story, or will we live according to it? Gethsemane teaches us about surrender, trust, and love. Jesus chose the Father's will, even in the face of pain. He did not run, he did not back down, and he did it all for you. Now the question remains: how does this story change your life? If this message touched your heart, don't leave without subscribing to the channel for more reflections that strengthen your faith. Comment below what impacted you the most, and share this video with someone who needs to hear about this unconditional love. And of course, don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. And there's more. In the card and the description, there's another special video for you. Click now and continue this journey of learning. May God bless you, and see you next time.